Welcome to A Voice for Creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. This week I want to talk about diversity in our work and in our lives, really. What I found is, and I've talked about this before, but I was just thinking about it again, and I had written in my notes, lack of diversity and fear of losing your base. And I think that what's interesting here is that we often are growing, right? We're growing until we reach success. Success could be you've got a lot of people following on your Instagram. Success could be you're making money. Success might be you've reached a certain point, you've got a certain client that you were looking for, gotten the cover of a magazine. It could be any number of things that a gallery show, right? These things are all measures of success that we kind of set for ourselves, like goals, right? Like these goalposts. And if we are aiming for something and we get to it, oftentimes we're like, yeah, and we bask in it, right? We're happy. We're like, we're where we want to be, which is awesome. And we should take a moment to celebrate and be happy there. But we also have to understand that once we get there, we can't just lock it in. We can't never change because the world is changing around us. And so many times I've seen, and frankly, it's happened to me, someone who meets a certain level of success and they're riding on it for a long time. Here we are, we do this shot this way, we use this lighting, we use the gels, or we use the whatever kind of lights, and we create this, and we have that look, and we just do it because it's super popular, and everybody's like, yeah, Daniel does that look. And then, slowly but surely, the next person comes up with their different way of using the gels, or the different lights, or the different look. And that starts to become more and more popular. And it starts to chip away. And you can't, you're here, right? I'm holding my hand up like you can see me. Well, I guess you can if you watch on Spotify. You're up here. You can't look at that new person and be like, oh, I'm going to do what they're doing, because that feels like a step down, right? It says, oh, I can't do what that new young person is doing. I'm the expert. But slowly but surely, that style becomes the more popular style. Now you're dated. Now you are losing fans and followers because you no longer are the thing they want to see. And this doesn't have to happen. And if we're smart, and also true to ourselves, we will change. Because think about it, you're not the same person you were when you first started the journey towards that goal. When you first wanted to become the biggest headshot photographer in your town, you were a different person than you are when you become the biggest headshot photographer in town. So we have to think the world's changing, we're changing. So should our approaches and our styles. And styles here, I don't mean like your style, but styles of operation, like different type of tools that you might use, they should also change. And this does not mean that you have to abandon what you're doing. Your true style, using style in that way, will go beyond the gear you're using. Your true style is not about that light or that gel. Your true style is about you and what you express and what you put into the images. You need to know or figure out how you can use new things, change and adapt, but still keep your core self. This is really the key to being, or the key to longevity, we'll say, as an artist. So one great thing that you can do is to just experience new things, or experience something that you experienced a long time ago, now through your changed eyes. Think about a book that you read maybe when you were in your 20s, and now let's say you're in your 40s. You look at it differently. Or a movie even, or even music to some level, right? We look at these things differently now because we have changed. They haven't, right? And this allows us to say, hey, this technique that I'm using might still be great, but let me change the way that I'm using it based on how I've changed, what I've learned, and what I can add to it to make it even more my own than it already was. If we're always afraid of losing what we've got, we're never going to move forward. Think about like you're climbing a rock face. Now you're a rock climber. We're all over the place today, right? But now you're a rock climber and you're climbing up and you've got real far. Well, how did you get there? By reaching for that next handhold, by pushing yourself. Now you're halfway up the wall and you see there's one you got to really stretch to reach it. But if you don't reach and stretch to grab it, you can't just stay where you are. Eventually you will become exhausted and you'll have to go back down, right? You only stay where you are for so long. So you've got to either move up or back. You really can't stay in one spot for very long. Well, for very long. On the wall, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a rock climber, so you tell me if you're a rock climber. But, In business, you might be able to float on a certain kind of high of what you're doing for a couple of years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but eventually it will sink. And what you want to do is keep going up that way no matter what. As the bottom starts to fall out, you're building new bottoms, you're growing, you're expanding. And one of the best ways to do this, like I said, is to experience new things or old things through new eyes. If you are in a position to do it, travel someplace you haven't been. If you cannot travel like far away, go to a different part of your hometown that you don't go to. Go walk through the park on the other side of town. Go to one town over and eat at their local pizza place or whatever. Change what you do. See it from a different point of view. Go to a play. Go to a movie that's out of character for what you would do. Read a book, right? Go to the library. Do these different things that might not always be first in your mindset of what you should be doing. If you go to these places that even if they're around you and not super far away, it will change you. When I was in college many, many years ago, we used to go to the museum together as a class. We would go there and bring with us our pencils and pastels and stuff and sit, because you couldn't obviously photograph things. And even if you could, like, while you're photographing a painting, I don't know. And we would sit there and we would look at the art and we become inspired by it and maybe even try to replicate some of it as best we could with the tools we had, or just grab inspiration from what was around us and sit there and create. And creating there in that other environment, that museum, was so different than sitting in the studios where maybe we had all the stuff that we could work with, everything around us that we needed, but we didn't have that change that brought on the inspiration to create the work that was different than what we normally do. Okay, talking a little bit more about kind of organizational process, and maybe I'll do an entire episode on just kind of my process as we throw some of these out there, but one thing I found really handy is to kind of schedule out points during the day to do things like email and checking any social media that you might need to check for your business or your art that you're putting out there. In other words, instead of picking up your phone whenever you feel like it to look at Instagram to see if somebody liked your stuff, mute all those notifications and then schedule a time. At 9 a.m. every day and at 1 p.m. and at 7 p.m. I spend 10 minutes looking at the social media, replying to anybody who's reached out to me and those kinds of things. You're worried, I might miss a post. That's fine. It's not going to be the end of the world. I've talked about this before, the fear of missing out and leaving my phone at home. Schedule this stuff out. Do it in a way that you are in control of it. You're not just there at the beck and call of whatever piece of social media or email or whatever comes in at that moment. Very, very, very rarely are you going to get something that you absolutely had to do at that moment. And if it does happen, it happens. Again, it's usually not the end of the world. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already, please do rate and review the show. Share it with your friends so that we can get more listeners over here. Also, you can check out my Discord server. There's a link to that in the show notes, and my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. I'll talk to you soon.